All right. So you've been hearing about the Model Context Protocol, MCP, and people have been talking about how they're using MCP to do this or that and all of these amazing things, but you're not really sure what it is. Well, in this video, I'm going to explain everything to you. So start to finish, we're going to get started with a visual overview of what the MCP is, how does it work behind the scenes, and why does it matter? And then we'll actually go into building something with MCP. I'll show you real world use cases of how I use MCPs and how you can set it up as well for your job, for your work, for your life, and automate a lot of things that you've been doing manually, even with the power of AI. So let's get started. Why was the MCP created? Well, the first thing is when you're using a chatbot like OpenAI's ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude, those chat tools come built in with certain capabilities. So if I'm using ChatGPT, I can ask ChatGPT for information and it would search the web. How does it do that? It's because OpenAI built an integration. It built the functionality for ChatGPT to use the internet to do a search on the internet. And the same thing with Claude, right? Claude has a Google Drive integration. So if I wanted to have it pull in a certain document I've written and read that document to me or make changes, the Google Drive integration allows you to pull that document into your Claude chat. Gemini has an integration with YouTube because it's built by Google. So you can put in a YouTube link and Gemini automatically extracts the full video into the chat. Now, the thing is, these apps had to build that integration on their own. They have to build a web search, they have to build the Google Drive integration, they have to build the YouTube or the GitHub integration and so on and so forth. And so it's a lot of work for these companies to keep building these integrations. And if you have a very specific use case, you want a certain integration, well, you might be out of luck because it may not even be on the roadmap of those companies. So what do? How would you get ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini to integrate with, let's say, your personal blog? Let's say you wanted your blog or a Claude or ChatGPT to pull in information from your blog, and you can work with ChatGPT or Claude to update that information and push it back to your blog and update your blog. Well, you can't do that. You have to manually copy and paste. You have to copy all the content in your blog, put it into your chat, type stuff out, work with the AI, copy all of that back, put it back on your blog, and then republish it. So Anthropic came up with something smart. They said, well, instead of us building integrations for everything, why don't we build a sort of universal adapter? Why don't we build something where people can build their own integration and just plug it into Claude? So think of the MCP as a way for Claude to say, all right, we are the computer and we're going to build a USB port. So if you want information on a external hard drive in your computer, all you have to do is plug that into your USB port. And that's basically what the MCP is, right? It's a fancy word, it's Model Context Protocol, but really it's just a protocol, a communication way or pattern for an AI model to get context. Model Context Protocol, right? So if you look at my screen here, AI app like Claude or Cursor just builds an MCP client, and now all you have to do is start to plug in different servers to that client. And instantly that app, that AI chat gets the context from that server. I'll go into what all that means, like the server and client, but it's really just a way for, instead of Anthropic or the AI companies building integrations for every single thing out there, all they do is they build one thing. They build what is called the MCP client, right? And you don't have to worry about how they build it. They just do. They build an MCP client and they give you the functionality. I'll show you how that works in a second. And then all you have to do is say, all right, I want you to be able to search the web. So you get a web search server and you plug it in there. And so this little document here is a document, the config file that says, hey, Claude, you have access to Google Drive, you have access to web search, and you have access to my private blog. Okay. So that's the visual layout of how it works. Your AI app is also called the MCP host. They build an MCP client, and then you as a user will connect an MCP server to that client so that the AI app or the host now has access to the information on that server, which could be Google Drive documents, your blog site, or a web search API. Let's see how this works in practice. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to download Claude onto your desktop. Now I'm using Claude as an example here for this video, but Claude is not the only MCP client out there. If you're a software engineer using Cursor, Cursor has built an MCP client. There's plenty of other AI tools that have built MCP clients. ChatGPT as well and OpenAI have built in MCP client capabilities into their SDK. So when you're building agents with ChatGPT, you can use that MCP client as well. But I'm going to use Claude as a very basic example. It's a simple example because this will show you, if you're using Claude or some other tool like this, how you can just do it yourself. So if you want to actually run this on your own, go to claude.ai/download, get the app. That's the first step. Once you have the app, you'll see what you see on my screen, which is the same Claude interface, but in your desktop, right? And so the reason we're doing this in the desktop is because, unfortunately, it kind of just works locally right now, the MCP for Claude. So your MCP client and host and the servers are all going to be local on your computer. It doesn't have the ability yet to do remote servers. That will come soon. But again, very simple and basic example. You open up Claude, and the first thing you've got to do here is go to Settings. And then click on Developer, and you can see these tools over here. There's a few errors happening for me. I need to fix these. I'm just developing my own servers. But essentially, you can see here I have Exa, Twitter, WordPress, and this is a Brave search, the Brave API search. WordPress is my private WordPress blog. And I've built a server that allows Claude to get my blog into the chat, so I don't have to copy and paste stuff in there. So you can see how the value of having MCP here, right? Because I can't expect Anthropic to build an integration to my blog or to WordPress, because they may never have that on their roadmap. But now all I have to do is plug in a WordPress server and then give it some credentials like the website, my blog website, my API key, and then it has access to my full blog. So I'm just going to close. So once you come in here to the developer, you click on Edit Config. And that's going to open up a JSON config file. A JSON config file is really just like a text file with structured data. And all this config file is doing is telling Claude, hey, here's the server that we want you to use. And so it has information for all the 4 servers I have here. It has Exa, Twitter, WordPress, Brave. So it's given all this information in a text file. And every time Claude starts, so once you edit that config file and put it in there and just tell it which servers you want it to use, you have to restart Claude. And so every time Claude starts up on the desktop, you'll get a little option here, 15 MCP tools available. So if I click on that, you can see all the tools available. And these tools are basically defined by the MCP server. So when I created the WordPress MCP server, and you can use my WordPress MCP server and put in your details, or there's plenty of other people who have built WordPress MCP servers and they've loaded on GitHub. So you can just copy those servers as well and install it into your AI tool of choice like Claude, and then give it your own API keys. But essentially, when I built the server, I gave it a bunch of tools and functionality. I said, all right, when Claude asks for information, it can use the create a page function. And the create a page function essentially allows Claude to create a new page, and it adds a title and content to that page. So I'll give you a quick example of why this is important. Attach from MCP basically is saying, choose one of the integrations you've built. So I've built the WordPress integration. I'm going to choose WordPress Site Info. WordPress Site Info contains information about my website. And so now it's useful because without this information, if I said to Claude, hey, I want to update my website, Claude has no context about my website. But now with this information and this integration, Claude has full context in that document. I didn't have to copy paste anything. Now I can, for example, I'll say, tell me about my website, right? So it's going to go and read that document based on the information provided. Here's what I can tell you. And then it's going to ask me permission for all the tools it can use in my MCP server, like reading all the posts on my site, reading all the pages on my site, reading the categories on my site, reading a bunch of other stuff. And I'm just going to give it access to all of this. Based on my analysis, here's a comprehensive overview of the site, your website, blah, 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 where you identify, so on and so forth. And it does all these things. Recent blog post, correct. I did write a blog post on Claude. That's the most recent one. I've got services on AI training, workshops, custom AI development, location-specific consulting. I'm mainly Canadian based, and a bunch of other stuff. Blog category with 17 posts, tons of information. So it's read everything about my website, which it could not do earlier. If you try to do this on your own, it doesn't know that, right? So it got the context, and now it knows, right? And now here's the cool part. I can actually say, well, suggest some improvements to my site. So I can just ask, I can start chatting with Claude now and say, all right, let's enhance my site. Let's make the copy better. Let's write some new blog content. And I can, so here you go, create a dedicated about page. Yeah, that's true. It doesn't have a comprehensive one. Implement a newsletter sign up. I actually don't have that yet. I do have a couple places, but it's not throughout the website. Add some more case studies. Yes, I should be doing that too. I haven't done that yet, and so on. But I could also say, suggest some new blog titles, some new blog posts to write about based on existing ones. And so it's going to give me some new topics. So it's reading all the content on my site. And boom, it's going to give me some new topics to write about. Getting some new, it's reading every article one by one actually. So it's getting a bunch of articles, understanding what I'm writing, and then says based on your, okay, so part 2, which is very obvious because I've already written part 1, combining Anthropic and OpenAI, building custom AI guardrails, so on and so forth. This is really good stuff. Now I can future model context protocol, what's next after MCP. So I've written an MCP tutorial, and this is like what comes next. So this is really great. Now I can actually say, okay, let's write one of these blog posts. So I can even just say with Claude, can you elaborate on this idea? Or let's start to create a blog post, and I'll give it my point of view. We'll work together to create a blog post. I actually have MCPs for search as well. So I can say, go search for stats, information, stuff that will contribute to my blog post. So it can go pull in stuff from the internet. I can put that into the blog post. And then when I'm done, I can actually say, publish this to my website, and Claude will do that because it has the MCP integration. So hopefully you've seen how easy it is to build stuff with MCP to make your chatbot, whether it's Claude or Cursor or ChatGPT, much more capable of actually doing things. Because earlier it couldn't do any of this stuff unless you copied and pasted stuff in or gave it. And then the other thing is it can't actually write content to your blog because it doesn't have the integration. So you would have to copy that back and paste it into your blog. But now it's so much easier. I just have one interface and I chat with Claude and we brainstorm and we come up with topic ideas and we create content, and Claude just pushes it back to my blog and it's done. I don't need to keep copying and pasting and figuring things out like that. And so something that takes you a long time shortened into a much shorter time frame because of the MCP. Now, this is just one example of how I personally use MCP, but there's many other ways you can use it. Just to give you some ideas of how you go about doing it, you can connect a Slack server, MCP server, to Claude, and now Claude will have access to your Slack. So you can have Claude summarize all the conversations that's happening in Slack, or even like write a message on your behalf to a Slack channel. You can connect Claude to all your documentation. Let's say you have a Notion where all your company information is stored. You create an MCP server for Notion, or you use a pre-existing, pre-built server. You find one on GitHub. And you can like connect Notion to Claude and ask Claude to, if you have a question about like, hey, what did we say to this client the other day? Claude will go find that in Notion if that is stored somewhere, right? You can connect your meetings to Claude via MCP and say, all right, what did we discuss in this meeting? And Claude will give you a summary, right? So tons of really useful ways to do this. And I'm going to show you where you can find a bunch of MCP servers. So once you go look through those MCP servers, you may get some more ideas. So Smithery is a registry for MCP servers. There's a bunch of them actually out there. There's a few of these kind of long lists and registries of servers. But Smithery is great because it also gives you instructions on how to install the MCP server. So here's some of the featured ones. GitHub, Brave Search, which is what I use, and a few others. There's like Exasearch, Perplexity Search, Knowledge Graph, Memory, Browser tools. There's a YouTube MCP server, so you can pull in YouTube content, YouTube transcripts as well. Tons of them. And so if you click on one of these, there's an installation guide up here. So you can see what tools are available in this MCP server. So you need to log in first, but then you log in and then it show you how to actually deploy those MCP servers. And that is it for my MCP guide. If you want to learn more, if you want to build your own MCP servers, visit my blog. I've shown all examples of how to build out a server, including all the code you need. You could just copy some of that code and paste it in if you know how to code. If you don't know how to code, I suggest you don't really build your own MCP servers, because you could just use an existing list, use one of the servers there. All you have to do is, the way I showed you earlier, edit the config file and point it to the server. In fact, these lists will give you the exact installation instructions on how to configure the client and the server. And so once you download the server into your computer, you set it up in the config, and boom, Claude has access to it. Restart Claude. Now it's got access to that specific server, and you can do things. You can get information, send information, whatever the server allows you to do. Best way to start is to start. So go download Claude Desktop. It's the easiest way to get started and familiarize yourself with MCP, and then you can use other MCP clients. Go use an existing server, play around with it, and then you can maybe learn how to build your own servers. Again, my blog has the instructions. And if you need more inspiration on how to use this, I gave you an example of how I use it to create blog content to improve my website. But there's so many other ways you can do it. You can use it with say for example, connect your GitHub MCP and push code or pull code. You can do end-to-end workflows as well with MCP. It just is the possibilities are limitless. And so all you have to do is just experiment and try things out. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, and I have way more deep dives coming up on various AI agents and AI tools.